At our divorce hearing, my ex demanded, "I deserve full custody and alimony. I gave up my career for this family." The judge reviewed the evidence and declared, "You never had a job to begin with, but you did have 3 affairs. Custody awarded to the father." Her scream when the gavel fell, "I never wanted to be a single dad. I never wanted to drag my children through a divorce. And I certainly never imagined I'd be sitting in a courtroom while a judge dismantled the elaborate fantasy world my ex-wife had been living in for the past decade." But sometimes the truth needs to come out, no matter how ugly. Let me take you back to the beginning. I met Elizabeth during my final year of medical residency in California. She was working as a receptionist at the hospital's administrative office. Temporary work, she explained, while pursuing her real passion of screenplay writing. She was beautiful, vibrant, and had an endless supply of fascinating stories about her life before we met. According to Elizabeth, she had graduated top of her class from UCLA Film School, worked as an assistant to a major Hollywood producer, sold a screenplay that was in development at Paramount, traveled extensively through Europe on writing grants, turned down a prestigious position at a New York publishing house. I was exhausted from 80-hour work weeks and completely captivated by this creative whirlwind who seemed so different from the methodical, science-minded people I was surrounded by daily. When we married 2 years later, I thought I understood what I was signing up for. Supporting a talented, ambitious writer whose career would flourish alongside mine. Our twins, Emma and Ethan, were born 3 years into our marriage. Elizabeth had been between projects for most of our relationship, with various promising opportunities always just on the horizon. When she suggested staying home with the twins rather than hiring a nanny, it made perfect sense. She could write while they napped, and we'd save on childcare costs. The first few years of parenthood passed in a sleep-deprived blur. My practice was growing, requiring long hours, and I was grateful that Elizabeth was managing the home front. If her writing career seemed permanently stalled, well, raising twins is demanding. There would be time for her screenplays later. By the time the twins were in first grade, our dynamic had solidified. I worked, handled our finances, and spent every spare minute with the children. Elizabeth managed the household theoretically, though our home was perpetually chaotic. She was always working on something big in her home office, though I never saw completed manuscripts. When I would gently inquire about her projects, the responses became predictable. The producer had a family emergency. Everything's delayed. My agent thinks we should take it in a different direction. The industry is impossible right now. Everyone knows that. I began to notice other inconsistencies. Reference to prestigious connections who never materialized. Stories about her past that changed depending on who she was talking to. A surprising lack of basic knowledge about the film industry for someone with her supposed background. I buried my doubts. We had built a life together. We had children. And confronting what was increasingly looking like a web of lies meant confronting the fact that I'd been played for a fool. The breaking point came when the twins turned 8. Elizabeth announced she needed a $15,000 investment for a screenwriting workshop in Hawaii. A 3-week intensive that would finally launch her career. Something inside me snapped. After a decade of supporting her non-existent career, I finally asked for proof, any proof, that her writing aspirations were legitimate. The fight was apocalyptic. She accused me of never believing in her, of undermining her confidence, of being controlling and abusive. When I held firm, she stormed out. 3 days of silent treatment followed, ended by her tearful apology and promise to be more transparent. A week later, I received a call from an unknown number during surgery. My office took a message. Jim says he's sorry, but he can't make it tonight. Something about his wife asking questions. I didn't know any Jim. A sickening suspicion formed. While Elizabeth was shopping with the kids that weekend, I did something I'm not proud of. I checked her laptop. What I found shattered any remaining illusions. Not a single screenplay. Not one completed creative project. But hundreds of emails and messages to multiple men, going back years. Detailed conversations that made it clear she was involved in at least 3 ongoing affairs. These weren't brief indiscretions. These were sustained relationships, with regular meetings disguised as writing groups and industry events. One had been going on for over 4 years. Her home office time was spent coordinating her extramarital life, not building a career. Worse, buried in her email archives, I found the truth about her background. No UCLA film degree, she'd never attended college, no Hollywood connections, no sold screenplay. Her entire history was fabricated, elaborate lies she'd maintained throughout our relationship. I consulted a lawyer before confronting her, gathering evidence methodically. I documented everything I found on our shared family computer and forwarded relevant emails to my attorney through proper channels to ensure admissibility. When I finally laid it all out, her response was chilling. No denial, no remorse. Instead, she smiled and said, "What are you going to do about it? No judge will take those children from their mother." She was so confident, so arrogant in her certainty that maternal preference would shield her from consequences. It was as if the person I'd married had been replaced by a stranger. Or perhaps the stranger had been there all along, wearing a carefully constructed mask. I filed for divorce the next day in Los Angeles County Superior Court, requesting primary physical custody with joint legal custody based on her pattern of deception and the instability it created for our children. My attorney advised me to be prepared for a complex legal process. While California family courts have evolved beyond automatic maternal custody, many judges still lean toward mothers in cases without clear evidence of unfitness. But we had evidence, properly obtained through legal means, from shared family devices that we both had authorized access to. The divorce process was brutal. Elizabeth transformed into someone unrecognizable, telling anyone who would listen that I was controlling, abusive, and trying to punish her for wanting a career. She emptied our joint accounts before they could be frozen. She tried to alienate the children, telling them Daddy wanted to take them away because he didn't love Mommy anymore. The only thing she didn't do was get a job, despite claiming financial hardship. Instead, she demanded temporary spousal support, claiming she'd sacrificed her promising career to raise our family and needed time to rebuild her professional life. I felt like I was drowning. The only anchor was the truth, and my love for Emma and Ethan, who were confused and hurting as their family disintegrated. Our case proceeded through all the standard phases of a contested California divorce with minor children. First, we had temporary orders hearings where Elizabeth was awarded interim physical custody, I received generous visitation, and I was ordered to pay temporary support. The court appointed a custody evaluator, a licensed psychologist who spent months interviewing us, our children, and collateral contacts to make recommendations about permanent custody arrangements. A minors' counsel was also appointed to represent Emma and Ethan's interests independently. The court ordered Elizabeth to seek employment during the pendency of the divorce, but she consistently claimed her specialized skills in entertainment made finding work difficult. Our case dragged on for 11 months before reaching the final hearing for permanent orders. 11 months of temporary arrangements, evaluated parenting time, and escalating hostility. 11 months of watching my children suffer while Elizabeth weaponized them in her campaign for maximum financial support. By the time we reached the courtroom for final determinations, I was emotionally exhausted, but resolved. My attorney had built a meticulous case, documenting Elizabeth's fabricated background, her affairs, and her continued refusal to seek employment, despite claiming career aspirations. The custody evaluator's report strongly favored me receiving primary physical custody, citing concerns about Elizabeth's tenuous relationship with reality and pattern of prioritizing personal gratification over children's needs. Judge Harriet Chen had a reputation for fairness and thoroughness. She'd been assigned to our case after our initial judge recused himself due to having previously represented a medical practice where I had been briefly employed years earlier. A connection Elizabeth's attorney discovered and appropriately raised. I expected more delays, more manipulation. I didn't expect what actually happened. The hearing had been specially set for a full day due to the complexity of issues involved, allowing Judge Chen adequate time to review all evidence and hear extended testimony. Elizabeth's attorney presented first, painting a picture of a devoted mother who had sacrificed everything for her family. He described her as a talented professional who had set aside her promising career in entertainment to raise our children while I built my medical practice. Your Honor, he concluded dramatically, Miss Miller is asking for primary physical custody with joint legal custody and spousal support of $12,500 monthly for 8 years to allow her to rebuild the career she sacrificed. This reflects both the length of the marriage and the significant income disparity between the parties. Judge Chen turned to Elizabeth. Miss Miller, you're claiming you abandoned your career to raise your children. Is that correct? Elizabeth stood, the picture of wounded dignity. Yes, Your Honor. I had just sold my first screenplay when I became pregnant. I chose to prioritize our family over my own ambitions. And what specific position did you leave? Elizabeth hesitated, just slightly. I was working with Paramount Pictures, Your Honor. In development. In what capacity? What was your job title? Another hesitation. I was technically a contractor, Your Honor, but on track for a permanent position. Judge Chen nodded, making notes. And you haven't worked since the children were born? For approximately 9 years? That's correct, Your Honor. I've been a full-time mother and homemaker. My attorney was practically vibrating with anticipation beside me. We had submitted extensive documentation, but it wasn't clear how thoroughly the judge had reviewed it before the hearing. Miss Miller, Judge Chen continued, I've reviewed the evidence submitted in this case very carefully, including the custody evaluator's report and recommendations. I've seen the documentation regarding your employment history, educational background, and activities during the marriage. Elizabeth smiled confidently. The judge continued, her tone measured. Would you like to revise any of your statements before we proceed? No, Your Honor, Elizabeth replied smoothly. Everything I've said is accurate. Judge Chen looked down at her notes, then back up. Miss Miller, are you aware that providing false information to this court constitutes perjury? The confidence in Elizabeth's expression flickered. Your Honor, her attorney interjected, looking confused. Counsel, I'm giving your client an opportunity to correct the record before we continue, Judge Chen said firmly. Because according to the evidence, not only did Miss Miller never work for Paramount Pictures in any capacity, she has never been employed in the entertainment industry at all. The courtroom went silent. Judge Chen continued. Employment records submitted to this court show that Miss Miller worked as a temporary receptionist at various businesses before her marriage. She did not graduate from UCLA or any other university. There is no record of her having sold a screenplay or any other creative work. Elizabeth's attorney looked stunned, clearly having accepted his client's representation of her background without verification. Furthermore, the judge continued, evidence has been presented regarding Miss Miller's activities during the marriage, which do not reflect the full-time child-rearing and homemaking she has described. At this point, Elizabeth finally found her voice. Your Honor, I can explain. Please do, Judge Chen interrupted, because I have reviewed text messages, emails, and hotel receipts documenting what appear to be 3 separate extramarital relationships conducted over the past 5 years. Messages in which you specifically discuss using your supposed writing career as a cover for these activities. The blood drained from Elizabeth's face. I also note, Judge Chen continued, that despite claiming financial hardship and career sacrifices, you have made no effort to secure employment during these proceedings, despite the temporary support order specifically requiring you to do so. What happened next will stay with me forever. Elizabeth stood up straight, her shock transforming into indignation. I deserve primary custody and alimony, she shouted, abandoning all pretense of composure. I gave up my career for this family. He's a doctor. He can afford it. The children need their mother. Judge Chen's gaze hardened. Miss Miller, control yourself or you will be held in contempt. Turning to review her notes again, the judge spoke clearly for the record. Based on the evidence presented, the custody evaluator's recommendations, and the report from Minors' Counsel, I find that Miss Miller has deliberately misrepresented her background, her activities during the marriage, and her contributions to the family. She has demonstrated a pattern of deception that directly impacts her credibility regarding all matters before this court. Looking directly at Elizabeth, she continued, You never had a job in the entertainment industry to begin with, Miss Miller, but you did have 3 affairs while your husband supported the family and cared for your children. The court has considered all statutory factors regarding spousal support, including the duration of the marriage, the standard of living established, and each party's earning capacity. Given your demonstrated capacity for employment, your willful failure to seek work despite court orders, and the court's finding regarding your credibility, your request for spousal support is denied beyond the transitional support ordered for 6 months to allow you to secure employment. The judge turned to address custody matters. Regarding the children, this court finds that the father has been the primary functional parent despite his demanding profession. The documented pattern of dishonesty by the mother creates an unstable environment not in the children's best interests. She looked at both of us over her glasses. Primary physical custody is awarded to the father, with joint legal custody requiring consultation on major decisions. Mother will have visitation every other weekend and 1 weekday evening, to be supervised for the first 6 months by a professional supervisor from the court's approved list. After 6 months, the court will review this arrangement based on compliance with ordered therapy and completion of the court's co-parenting education program. The judge continued. Child support will be calculated according to California guidelines based on the father's actual income and mother's imputed income at entry-level administrative salary, resulting in a monthly obligation of $750 from mother to father, which will be stayed until mother secures employment. The gavel fell with a sharp crack. Elizabeth's scream echoed through the courtroom, a primal howl of rage and disbelief. "You can't do this to me!" she shrieked as her attorney physically restrained her from approaching the bench. Judge Chen remained impassive. "Miss Miller, you've done this to yourself. Additionally, you are held in contempt of court for this outburst, with a fine of $1,000. This court is adjourned." Bailiffs moved forward as Elizabeth continued to shout obscenities. I sat motionless, overwhelmed by a tidal wave of emotions. Relief, vindication, sadness, and profound worry about how to help my children through the aftermath of their mother's public meltdown. Outside the courtroom, my attorney squeezed my shoulder. "Breathe," she advised. "We got the right outcome. Now the healing can start." The aftermath was both better and worse than I expected. Elizabeth complied with the court-ordered therapy and completed the required New Beginnings co-parenting program. After 6 months, we returned to court for a review hearing where Judge Chen modified the visitation order to remove the supervision requirement based on positive reports from the supervisor and Elizabeth's therapist. Emma and Ethan struggled initially with nightmares, separation anxiety, and behavior problems at school. We found an excellent child psychologist who helped them process their complex feelings about their mother's deception and the divorce. Children are remarkably resilient when provided stability and honesty. We established a rule early on. I would never speak ill of their mother, but I would always tell them the truth in age-appropriate ways when they asked questions. The most difficult conversation came when Emma, now 10, asked why Mommy had lied about so many things. Sometimes, I explained carefully, people tell stories because they wish they were true. They tell them so often they start to believe them themselves. "But why did she cheat?" Ethan asked bluntly. I took a deep breath. "I don't know for sure, buddy. Sometimes adults make choices that hurt people they care about. It doesn't mean she doesn't love you. It means she made mistakes." 2 years have passed since that day in court. I've rebuilt our lives around truth and consistency. Elizabeth eventually found employment in administrative work and later moved into sales, where her communication skills proved valuable. She has maintained her visitation schedule reliably for the past year and pays her child support as ordered. The twins continue working with their therapist periodically, especially during transition points like starting middle school. They're thriving academically and making steady emotional progress. We've all had therapy. I've even started dating recently, a pediatric nurse who understands the demands of both my profession and single parenthood. As for the lessons in all this, there are many. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Document everything when dealing with someone who rewrites reality. And perhaps most importantly, the truth may take time to emerge, but it eventually finds its way to the surface. The system worked for us, but I recognize that's not always the case. Family courts are imperfect, often overburdened institutions trying to make impossible decisions about people's lives based on limited information. We were fortunate to have a judge who took the time to thoroughly review the evidence, looking past gender stereotypes and cultural assumptions about parenting roles. Not everyone gets that lucky. To those fighting their own battles in family court, document everything through proper legal channels, find a good attorney who believes in your case, and never lose sight of what really matters: the well-being of your children. The path ahead isn't perfect. Co-parenting with someone who reshaped reality for a decade isn't easy. But we're finding our way, one day at a time. And that scream in the courtroom, it wasn't just rage at losing. It was the sound of a carefully constructed fantasy world collapsing, the moment when fiction finally yielded to fact. Sometimes justice sounds like a gavel. Sometimes it sounds like a scream. Update. 3 years after court decision, many of you have asked for an update, so here it is. Life has settled into a new normal that would have been unimaginable 3 years ago. Elizabeth has actually turned her life around in ways I wouldn't have predicted. The shock of the court ruling seems to have triggered genuine self-reflection. She's maintained steady employment for over a year now, completed all her court-mandated therapy, and has been a reliable presence in the kids' lives. We're not friends, but we've achieved a functional co-parenting relationship focused solely on Emma and Ethan's well-being. The children spend every other weekend with her, plus 1 weeknight dinner. Last month, she attended Emma's science fair and Ethan's piano recital without drama or attempting to undermine my authority, a small miracle given our history. The most surprising development came 6 months ago when she asked to meet for coffee alone. I was wary, but agreed, provided we meet in public. "I need to say something that's long overdue," she began once we were seated. "I'm sorry for everything. The lies, the affairs, trying to take the kids from you, all of it." I must have looked skeptical because she continued, "I don't expect forgiveness, or even for you to believe me. But my therapist diagnosed me with histrionic personality disorder with narcissistic features. With proper treatment, I've finally started to understand my patterns of behavior and why I created these elaborate fantasies." She paused, collecting herself. "The thing is, I did love you, and I do love our children. That was never a lie. I just didn't know how to be honest about anything else." I didn't respond immediately. After so many years of manipulation, words alone carried little weight. "Actions matter more than apologies," I finally said. "Keep showing up for the kids. Keep building something real. That's what matters now." She nodded, eyes downcast. "I'm trying." And the truth is, she has been. The lies have stopped. The dramatic stories of phantom career opportunities have been replaced with honest updates about her actual job. She's even started taking classes at the local community college, her first legitimate higher education experience. As for me and the kids, we're doing well. Emma and Ethan have adjusted to the custody arrangement and are thriving in school, though they still have occasional difficult days when transitioning between households. My relationship with Diane, the pediatric nurse I mentioned, has deepened. She's wonderful with the twins, and they've grown genuinely fond of her. We're taking things slowly, all too aware of how difficult blended family dynamics can be. But for the first time in years, I'm allowing myself to imagine a future that includes partnership and trust. The scars remain, of course. I still find myself verifying information instinctively, something Diane gently calls me out on when she notices. "Not everyone is Elizabeth," she reminds me. "Some people just tell the truth." I'm learning to believe that again. To those who asked if I regret exposing Elizabeth in court rather than settling for a less confrontational divorce, no. While the process was painful, the truth created a foundation for actual healing, for all of us. Her fantasy world was hurting our children as much as it was hurting me. Sometimes demolition must precede reconstruction. Life isn't a screenplay with neat narrative arcs and perfect closure. It's messy, complicated, and stubbornly resistant to our attempts to control it. But there's beauty in reality that fiction can never match. The authentic connections that form when we drop our masks and simply be who we are. That's the lesson I hope my children take from all of this. Truth, however imperfect, is always better than the most beautiful lie.